Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Chelsea Roar. Of course, the podcast that I'm now bringing you by a Chelsea fan for you, the fans. My name is Ian Kelly and I'm your host today. And you might see a familiar face as per our last video. We have the great Niall Hogan, of course, host of the Upper TierPodcast, which is also a fantastic football podcast on YouTube, which you should definitely check out. It's basically the talk sport of independent YouTube podcasts. And I think
it's the number one football podcast in Greystones.
There you go. There you go. Greystones, of course, a lovely little town off the coast of East Ireland, not far from my own hometown. So
population 35, and they've all subscribed.
All subscribed. And there's a couple of Bray lads in there as well that have subscribed. So we're all chipping in. And hopefully, if you like what you saw in the last video, or if you're watching this for the first time and you just managed to stumble across it and you're a Chelsea fan, or if you're not a Chelsea fan and you just want to have some content in your day, then please do be sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell notification and give us your support. It's not a lot to ask for, but I do ask of it. And also, please let us know what you think, because today we do have a really, really good show for you. In fact, a very important show. And the reason I brought Niall on today again is because I wanted to get an outsider perspective from, someone that doesn't really have a pony in the race, so to speak, but is watching from afar, but who also has great respect for Chelsea as a football club and the history as well. So, sometimes we can put banter aside and we can actually have adult conversations. Believe it or not, fan bases that have conversations on Twitter, that's not real life. I'm sure you see it yourself, Niall. It's not real life. And that's
although at times it can become real life very quickly with people.
If you allow it to. If you allow it to. So what we are going to talk today, I've called this today the Chelsea Roar, the bid to buy Chelsea. And I think that's a perfect title for this episode, because it is starting to heat up now. As we record this, we are the 8th of April, and basically this coming Monday, in 3 days.
3 days, the 11th.
Yeah, we're going to get pretty down to the nitty gritty of the final bidders. Now, as the Rain Group and as most American banks do, they've been very, very flexible with their deadlines here, which is a little bit annoying if you're a Chelsea fan and you just want to get some clarity as to what's going on. But in true Roman Abramovich fashion, we're not really hearing much. But we can put the pieces together and we can dot the I's and cross the T's. I want to give a great shout out. I don't usually on my podcasts, and Niall, you don't either, give shout outs to many rags, as we call them. But I think the Daily Telegraph's own Matt Law has done a fantastic job throughout this process and keeping people up to date. He's had to actually block comments on it as well, because people think he's on the payroll of certain groups. But a lot of my information I got today is from Matt Law, and so shout out to Matt Law and a great other Chelsea podcast, London is Blue. He's been on their show quite a lot, and those American boys do a great job over there. So it would only be right for me to mention that with a lot of the information that we've heard, that's where we're getting it from. So just wanted to say that and do our due diligence before we start the show. But I suppose, Niall, it'd be nice now that we have you on and you're not hosting. You've kind of been dying to talk about this whole process for a long time, and I suppose the journey, we won't spend too long on it, but the journey that has got us here. What's your whole thoughts on it? I mean, obviously, Roman being sanctioned, and he's obviously over in the Ukraine doing his bit now to try and broker some sort of peace and whatnot. And he's been sanctioned, but unfortunately, the people that have been punished are Chelsea Football Club. In fact, so much so that, believe it or not, you can't actually walk around the grounds even now. because of the sanctions. Like even at night, you know, I was staying in the hotel at the weekend. I wasn't even able to go around and just check out the light,
take pictures or
check out the bridge under the lights. The security
yeah.
are under strict instructions.
Well, I suppose the way it's gone down and the backdrop to it and everything, and we spoke on a number of podcasts previously saying that we can't believe it's amazing how far-reaching an invasion of the Ukraine by Russia has impacted on sport across the spectrum, not just Chelsea Football Club, but Olympians and other football teams and leagues and everything and all. These kind of things when they break out, when they call them like the beginning of world wars and stuff like that, are so far reaching, and it's scary to say the least, you know what I mean? And it's worrying, and I suppose that's why your fan base and Chelsea's fan base, you're very sensitive at the moment insofar as this has to go right, because you don't want to experience this again. Now, I don't think we'd experience it again to this level, because I don't think, you know, unless a war broke out, and again, like a world war, and the Brits and the US didn't see eye to eye, and Europe wanted to sanction the US, which I don't ever see happening, because those guys are so entangled in bed, it's untrue. So I don't see it being a problem. And it's funny when we go back and we look at the push for the Super League. When the Super League came out and there was a push for it, and of course, hats off to Roman. He was one of the first who came out and said, nah, I'm not having any of that. And hats off to him. But it was amazing how the US owners were vilified in that process. The likes of our own FSG, and of course the Glazers and Cronkies and all this. And it's amazing the way, when Russia becomes the bad guy through all this other stuff, all of a sudden the US model is where it's at, and that's how clubs should be owned, and this is the future and all that kind of thing. So it's interesting to have me on this show.
I have been advocating before that, if you recall.
Yeah, but it's interesting to have me on from that perspective, because obviously I'm in the middle of that ownership. We've had a lot of success. They've done a lot of really good stuff, but like other owners as well, they've made stupid decisions, and they've forgotten culturally what Liverpool is about and stuff like that. FSG at times, they try to bump up ticket prices and do all the silly stuff that they do, and naming rights and all that kind of silly stuff that they just were being badly advised. So the US model that no doubt I think Chelsea will come under some form of a US model as well, by the looks of this, and you're going to go through the bidders and the auction and what's going to happen and all that kind of stuff, which is quite exciting. But it's really, really interesting. I mean, the first thing I said to you when it all broke out, one, I said, I can't believe how far-reaching it was into sport, that it was able to affect sport so much. And the other thing that I said to you, first of all, I said, it's going to be difficult for your fan base to adjust to the fact that, you know, the way Roman exited the club would be what you would have never thought would happen.
Yeah.
In terms of his commitment to Chelsea Football Club and the financial commitment and everything made, and the success that he brought. And again, not dissimilar to the US model. At times he pulled the trigger at times and made crazy decisions at the club as well, but by far the good outshone the bad. But I think it's an interesting time for Chelsea, and it's an exciting time and stuff like that. They're really going through this whole process to get the right owners, and like, are these owners, you know, are they fit and proper? Are they, you know, is the money the way it should be? Is all this proper black and white on the paper? Is there a commitment there to do the things that's expected of Chelsea Football Club to bring it to the next level? And we'll talk about some of those things obviously as well during the podcast. But I think it's to me, I would look at it from a point of view, if I was a Chelsea fan, I would say, you had that Roman era. You now have to park that, take the good, look at the bad, whatever it is, move on. And now you should be getting very excited, because now you have an opportunity for Chelsea, not that it's normally out of that circle of world football, but to be at the forefront of that circle in terms of investment, in terms of development, in terms of training, in terms of players, in terms of, you're going to see Chelsea Football Club now with a stability that they haven't had for a long, long time, in terms of your management teams, in terms of your players, in terms of all that kind of stuff. And I think that's very exciting for Chelsea Football Club, because at times when Chelsea was doing really, really well, and then you had a bit of a drop off, that's when the trigger was pulled, and maybe it was pulled at the wrong time, stuff like that. A lot of managers, tended to get fired because of success nearly, You know what I mean? And they weren't given that chance that when they had a bit of a drop off to try and rekindle it and stuff like that. So for me, it's an exciting time. It's a worrying time for me, obviously, as a Liverpool fan, but it's an exciting time if you're a Chelsea fan. And I understand in the Chelsea fan base their concern within the different bidders, because of what's gone on, and you probably feel like, well, with the Roman situation, you are feeling a bit burnt and a bit hurt a bit, which is fair enough. But yeah, for me, if I was a Chelsea fan, I'd be excited right now. You're gonna obviously develop an absolute state-of-the-art training facility if you can even raise it more than what it is, and no doubt you probably can. You know, you're going to touch on some of the stuff with the stadium and all those other pieces that bring that success. It's not necessarily what you see at the forefront. It's always what's in the background that really brings that success. And we seen it ourselves at Liverpool with the AXA Training Centre, which is absolutely second to none in Europe. And all those other pieces that fit in there. And especially for you guys with such an academy and such an abundance of riches of players at a youth level and all that kind of stuff. This could be massive for you guys if it goes right.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of points that you made there I want to touch on, which are really fantastic points, by the way. And one thing in particular that you mentioned there was the kind of trigger happiness of Roman, and like, you know, some of the coaches that say a lot of my friends thought should have never left and probably should have been given more support and more backing. And to be fair, over the last, I suppose that's actually something that Marina has been guilty of, is, you know, for all the praise that she gets in terms of how good a negotiator she is, she's also a penny pincher, especially when you had unlimited funds basically from Roman. This year is case in point. I mean, we could have bought too many for, I think, up to 40, 50 million. Tuchel wanted him. He wanted a six. Could have went and pulled the trigger on Declan Rice for maybe about 85, 90. Could have got him in, pulled the trigger. And they didn't, of course. It's now kind of put us in a very kind of precarious position because of the uncertainty. However, as we go on, I think that's going to be ironed out. But also, you know, you mentioned sacking managers off the back of success. I mean, the harshest one ever has to be Carlo Ancelotti, right? You know what I mean?
In the tunnel at Goodison.
Yeah, for coming second. You know what I mean?
Whatever about getting sacked. Imagine getting sacked in the tunnel at Goodison.
And then
that's my Liverpool hat on me now. Good Lord.
And this is like, you know, this is after finishing second. You know, I know the previous year had absolutely, I think it was record amount of goals scored in the Premier League and all that year with,
yeah.
Drogba had an absolutely ridiculous year that year, and Elka did too. Lampard hit double digits that he always did. And so they're good points to make. And I think off the back of what you're saying, there is one way to appease the Chelsea fans now because of the love for Thomas Tuchel, is that any kind of board new owners coming in are going to say, right, let's give this man his 5-year contract. Let's have him as part of the recruitment as well. Whereas that wouldn't have necessarily been the case under the previous regime. So there are positives to look at when you think along those lines. Now, obviously, one of the prerequisites, we talked about this just off camera, was that Roman is obviously, listen, for anyone to say that whatever people's opinions on Roman Abramovich are, I'll leave that to them. This isn't a political podcast. This is a Chelsea football podcast. But the man's love for the club is quite clear, because obviously there were certain rules and regulations that Reign were given to abide by. And one was that money had to be put aside for the stadium, a certain amount as well. There's been obviously speculation on the amount, I think 1.5 billion. And then there was obviously a certain amount has to go into the playing squad in the first year or two, I believe. And basically they have to make Chelsea still compete. Now, obviously with other fan bases, especially the other London clubs, the likes of Arsenal in particular, or Tottenham, they're kind of getting their hopes up, thinking this is going to be the end of Chelsea under the Roman regime. What people don't realise is that it was only really in Roman's first 2 years that he was going out and, you know, setting the bar in terms of signings. Latter years, it was there were a little bit more smarter signs, or you get that one big one, and then that was it. So it wasn't a case of, this wasn't like, you know, career mode in FIFA. This was a case of like, right, we actually should be spending more on certain seasons than we did. I think the problem that Chelsea had, and one thing that I'm looking forward to going forward, is the recruitment team were not great, because you were recruiting players who were flavor of the season in some place, thinking you were making shrewd signings. Case in point, Timo Bakayoko. You know, and you were sacking your manager 2 years in, and then expecting another manager to come in and use those guys who may not fit their system. And I think that's what we're seeing with Thomas Tuchel now. There's players there that, if he was probably being honest, do not fit his system or his vision for football. And I think it's another reason why I was looking forward to bringing you on today, because I think Tuchel's very much in the Klopp camp in terms of what he would like. You know what I mean? He doesn't want just some jabroni coming in because of the name. He wants them to come in because they fit his system and what style of play he wants. So that, I just wanted to touch on the points that you made there, because I think that is very, very important. With a new regime and a new board, that will give him the flexibility to actually make our recruitment process better, because it doesn't always have to be 200 million a season, as Liverpool have shown. So with that, we're going to get into it. So we're going to go through the 4 bidders, but we're going to we're going to do it in bits and pieces. So, I mean, I'd be remiss without mentioning the Ricketts family first. They kind of went from second favourites to joint favourites, and then in some people's minds, some panicky Chelsea fans' minds, they've already been given the club, because they believe that Rain has given them preferential treatment. I just want to clarify, Matt Law as well has clarified as well, and a couple of other stations have clarified, they weren't actually given preferential treatment. The reason that they moved their meeting with Paul Cannaville, the Chelsea supporters, and the club, was due to the fact that the club season starts tomorrow. So they asked, could it be brought back so that they could go ahead and get back there for that. So look, I understand that makes sense. But the Ricketts family, I know Ken Griffin. For anyone who doesn't know Ken Griffin, he flew to London earlier this week, and I think he was with Tom and Laura Ricketts, who are basically, they're leading that particular consortium in the bid. And the Ricketts family, they held meetings with Bruce Buck, Marina Granaskoya, and Eugene Tenenbaum ahead of the deadline, obviously. Griffin, by the way, he's basically, he's the sole kind of he'd be the major shareholder in that, because he's the one bringing the big bucks, and he's also the money guy. Well, they also have a bank on top of him behind them. So I mean, the Ricketts, if the Ricketts were to win the bid, they're the ones that have the really, 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 really big bucks, because and I think a lot of Chelsea fans need to remember, whatever dirt they're trying to dig up on the Chicago Cubs, and it's getting ridiculous at this point. It's like a witch hunt. It's not the same backers that are involved in the Chicago Cubs that are involved in this Chelsea deal. They might be the front runners and the decision makers. However, the money behind them is coming from different sources. As you well know, Niall, you know how it works, obviously, with FSG. But Griffin is worth £21 billion. So he's 4 times the 4 times the bank account, say, that Roman Abramovich has. He's the 53rd richest man in the world, which is fucking mad to think. So basically, the Griffith one is the one that, obviously, for anyone who doesn't know, y'all do by this stage, though, they own the Chicago Cubs. they're basically fighting Todd Bowley, should I say, sorry, Martin Broughton and Stephen Paluca. I won't call him sir. I'm Irish. Sorry, guys. And as we know, we mentioned earlier, they've been given until April the 11th. As I said, Griffin would definitely be the majority shareholder if the Ricketts family were successful. So he really called the shots here on this one. For anyone, Niall, you're a businessman, you know what that means. So break that down for people. If he's the majority shareholder, but the Ricketts are the ones that are going to be the face of the club, essentially that means what?
It means every puppet has a puppet master.
Yeah, that's it. In black and white.
That's basically what it means. Sometimes there's guys who are successful in business because they sit in the background.
Yep.
And the guys who sit in the background are the guys who pull the strings. The guys who are out in the forefront are the guys who you think might get the sale over the line because of personality or personal situations or personality or whatever it is that they come across as. And the guys who come out and say, I was a Chelsea fan since the day I was born, they're the guys who stand at the front. The guys who stand at the back are the guys who write the checks.
Yep. Yeah. As Roman Abramovich has done. It's like never.
I think it was different with Roman. I think Roman stood at the front and at the back because he wrote the checks, but he was still the Chelsea fan.
He was still
so he was slightly different. He sailed his own ship.
Well, basically, yeah. So that's interesting, right? So Griffin, obviously himself, London earlier this week. We've known that it was, I believe, it was Tuesday that he met already with Paul Canaville, who I had the pleasure of meeting in person for the first time, even though he's been on my Dynamo's Dozen podcast in the past.
Yeah.
Absolute gentleman. And the reason, obviously, Paul has I suppose, a say in this is purely because a lot of Chelsea fans went and dug dirt on the Ricketts family and found that they were a right-wing kind of family. They'd supported Trump and stuff like that, and they'd come out and kind of made some kind of comments that weren't necessarily favorable to the Muslim community and all this kind of stuff. And look, I personally don't want wokeness brought into this, but also I don't want absolute lunatics running the club. So I'm gonna literally, this is the hill I'm gonna die on with this one. I told you it's a podcast by a fan for the fans. These are my opinions. If their viewpoints are that way and they have hate in their hearts, then of course I don't want them at the club. However, I do think they should be given an opportunity to, state their case as well, because I don't believe that it could be judged on politics because it doesn't suit your politics. And I think that's really where the divide within the fan base is coming, including, and I had a short conversation with Paul Canaville. He said he had a good meeting with them. He was impressed with their values in terms of what they want to do to honor the work that Chelsea has done for the LGBT community, for, the Black community, for the Muslim community, for, all races of the community. And they were quite happy with that. And they obviously made an 8-point outlay for Chelsea, which is there for anyone to see. You've probably seen it, Niall, yourself. It all makes sense. A lot of Chelsea Twitter / YouTubers / content creators were kind of calling it out as if they are the judge and the jury. I disagree with you all on that. As someone now getting into the world of it, and you probably hate me already if that's the case, that's absolutely fine. But like I say, if I choose a hill to die on, I'm dying on it. You know what I mean? And I'm standing by it. So I think they should be given a chance here on this one. Listen, if it's good enough for Paul Canaville, it's good enough for me. It's the way I see it. The first player to play for Chelsea.
I would say, has politics not interfered in the course of Chelsea Football Club in the last 2 months?
Exactly.
More than enough for a lifetime.
Exactly.
I certainly wouldn't be judging a bidder on the basis that they were a Trump supporter, because I'm sure when you go back and you look into the background of a lot of these billionaires and stuff like that, someone's toes got treaded on and someone's backside got kicked a few times. And look, none of us are squeaky clean if you look at our history in terms of the level of stuff and things like that.
No.
Who knows? what people have said and done in the past. And, you know, at the end of the day, you have to take these bids on their merits in terms of what it means to Chelsea Football Club, both financially and development and into the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Because the one thing I did say to you is, how often do these clubs come up for sale? It took a war for Chelsea to come up for sale, or an invasion, not a war, because a war would assume two people were a part of it. It was an invasion, not a war. But I think, you know, it took something like that for a club like Chelsea to end up coming up for sale. This does not happen. Rarely happens. Normally they're kind of, you know, a bit of a hostile takeover, as opposed to the opportunity that Chelsea is here now to have a look at a number of different bidders and select which one they believe is the best suited to Chelsea moving into the future and how it's going to develop. And if people are going to get hung up on stuff like that, that's, some of it might be hearsay, some of it might be real, but it might be in the past. And look, everyone can change, and everyone sometimes in their life says the wrong thing and the right thing. And, you know, these are not necessarily the people that are going to be running Chelsea Football Club. They may not have those views. If they do, as you said, you wouldn't like it to be a part of it. Look, we know from fan bases and stuff like that, there's enough hate in football without adding that in. We know all the stuff we're trying to do at the moment and removing racism and hate and all that social media stuff, and also that's not going to be added to by Chelsea Football Club in this process. So if people are worried about that, I would say you don't be worried about it. These people are going to do a fit and proper test, and this one has to be bang on, because between Chelsea Football Club and the UK government and Rain Bank and stuff like that, they can't get this one wrong. There's too many people involved. There's too many people sitting at the card table to get it wrong. And the thing about it is, this is a prize that no one believed 3 months ago would become available. And this is a proper prize to purchase.
Dude, it's actually mad. At one point, people were saying 2 billion. Rome was asking for too much because he was asking for 3. Probably going to exceed the 3 now, or get as close to exceeding it. Another financial backer that they have, the Ricketts, they seem to know people. Has been the Rock Entertainment Group, headed by Dan Gilbert, who also owns the Cleveland Cavaliers, and has major money. So you're talking about 2 major billionaires behind that. Notwithstanding the Ricketts themselves. So look, we'll move on from the Ricketts. I know there was a small protest outside Stamford Bridge when I was there the other day. It was headed by YouTubers who didn't have a ticket for the game, even had no interest in getting a ticket for the game. And there was 40 people there. So
well, look, you're entitled to express your view. If your views are for you, you're entitled to express it. If that's what you believe and you think that's what you don't want. Look, there's a lot of nervous tension in the fan base around this, and I'm not surprised. Man, the last time I felt anything even close to this was on the steps of the court the day FSG dug us out before we nearly disappeared off the planet. Yeah. So I know where you guys are at. I understand the nervousness. There'll be a lot of guys there that are still, and girls that are still, you know, Roman was this god. I understand that. And it's difficult to move on. Change is difficult for people when it's been ingrained in you. But I as I said already, I'm staring down through a telescope here, and I'm very fearful of what Chelsea could become in world football as a Liverpool fan.
Well, it's funny because I'm not nervous, and that's the thing, because I have done.
And you shouldn't be.
I have had this research on the, and as I said. Yeah. I still think there's a chance that they should be given if it gets to that level, because I talked to a couple of guys in Chelsea bars and they said, where will these fans be in a year's time if things turn out the way the fans want? This will all be forgotten about. You know what I mean? And look, absolutely. Look, I met Eunice that day. You probably know Eunice as well.
Yeah, great podcaster.
Eunice is absolutely fantastic. Lovely fella. Ma as well was there. Talked to Eunice, introduced myself. We'd had some wrestling talk back in the day, so I absolutely get there. You know what they're doing. But the point I'm making is that some of the organizers on Twitter didn't even show up.
Yeah.
At least Eunice and all showed up. You know what I mean? And I'm sure if Eunice could have had a ticket to the game, he'd have been at the game, sitting beside you, having a pint. So that's not for anyone there that thinks I'm having a go at the guys that were there. It's not the case. But what I'm saying is, a lot of organizers are organizing this from Twitter, and they're sitting there and they think they represent the Chelsea fans. They don't. The same way I don't represent every Chelsea fan here from my perspective. But when I say from a fan for the fans, I mean for the majority of the fans. And I talked to pretty much a good section of those fans that are there, season ticket holders every year. Talk to Chopper, talk to the guys, talk to Paul, and there is a divide within the fan base, and I get it. And no one person is correct or incorrect.
The one line going down through the middle is you all want the best for your club.
Absolutely.
It's just people's best for their club might be a slightly different view to other people, but at the end of the day, somewhere in the middle.
Well, let's get into flavor of the month next. And I'm gonna lay my cards on the table. My personal favorite, Todd Bowley. So this is the battle of the Cubs and the LA Lakers, and I just happen to like the LA Lakers colors that little bit more. But then again, I am a wrestling fan and I do love Chi-Town. So it's like, all right, I'm not going to die. So
he's a Dodgers guy, isn't he? He's a Dodgers.
What did I say? Lakers?
The Lakers, yeah.
Sorry. Well, there you go.
Equally as good.
I don't like the Lakers, actually. So I take that back. I'm an Orlando Magic guy.
Yeah.
Another blue team, right?
Yeah, well, Dylan plays basketball, and I rang him from Dallas last week. I said, "Do you want me to pick you up some LeBrons?" He says, "Don't even mention that, man."
Yeah,
Dylan's staunch on football.
Now listen, I wear my LeBrons. Like you notice, I only wear LeBrons.
Yeah.
But no, 100%. It's so I do apologize to any of the Lakers fans I've put out there, or Dodgers fans for getting your name wrong. But we grew up on football and stadiums rather than arenas. It's we're trying to learn. We're trying to learn as we go.
Yeah. As a Chelsea fan, you like a tinge of yellow, but you wouldn't be mad about purple. Doesn't suit you down in London.
It's a nice colour, but
yeah, West Ham can hang on to it.
Yeah, exactly. So Todd Bowley, obviously, his group is actually meeting today. I believe the meeting's probably already happened, done and dusted. So he's also meeting with Paul Cannaville and the Supporters Trust, and of course the board as well. He's kind of been the favourite for a long time, and the thing is, he's not actually come out and said a lot. But I think a lot of journalists have. But one thing he did yesterday, Niall, which was super impressive, as you've seen, Sky Sport caught him rocking up. Now I know you have a you know. Listen. I'm a pro wrestler. I know. People know when the camera's on you. But the fact is, he rocked up the right way. Pair of jeans, pair of kicks, and a Chelsea flag. And he went in with the fans and basically went to watch probably his first Chelsea game. I don't know. Maybe he's been there like many times. Because I know Bowley tried to buy back in
2019. Yeah, 2019.
And apparently the closest, just another little nugget of information, apparently it's come out that Abramovich was close to signing to the Ricketts about 4 or 5 years ago too.
Yeah.
But they couldn't agree on the final number. So, I mean, obviously Roman trusted them to bring the club in the right direction. It was just they couldn't agree on the money. But Ricketts, right, I'm just going to point out some key points. Like one of the things that stands out for this guy is he's basically said that he would write off the £8 million debt to the club owned by the Chelsea pitch owners, which is huge. For anybody out there, I mean, you're all Chelsea fans, you probably know that the Chelsea pitch owners actually own that little spot of land, the pitch, and they own that as a group. And it was done back in the day just so that Chelsea couldn't be, sold as an apartment type of complex because of the location that we're in. Which, I mean, that would be huge. But he's also indicated that he would be open to giving the fans a golden share, which obviously John Terry has been behind, and saying that Chelsea, there would be a small percentage where they have a say, in directions of the club and stuff like that. He's also said straight away he's backed by a lot of London property owners as well, and also property owners within the US. If you look at the LA Dodgers Stadium, the redevelopment of the LA Dodgers Stadium over the last 3 years, I actually went and looked at some pictures of it. Good Lord, it's unbelievable.
All those stadiums over there is unbelievable. I was in the AT&T last week. It's just
for WrestleMania.
You can't even imagine when you're in this stadium. It's incredible.
And that's it. And look, there is a little bit. We're going to get into the stadium later, and I'm glad you brought that up. We're going to get into the stadium, but obviously, yeah, he's obviously got Hans-Jörg Wyss, which a lot of people didn't like because apparently he wanted Roman Abramovich out of the club. He's like an 86-year-old Swiss businessman, worth a couple of billion himself. But Jonathan Goldstein as well. Goldstein has kind of been shone on because he's a Tottenham fan, but he is a major property developer within London. So listen, if Goldstein's there, he's not just suddenly going to want to make fancy shit because he's a Tottenham fan. He's a businessman first and foremost. Obviously, Daniel Finkelstein and Barbara Sharon. Now, this is the one that really makes a lot of sense. Daniel Finkelstein was a top lawyer, I believe, solicitor in London, but a Chelsea fan. And this is part of the golden share thing. They're two Chelsea fans, but a major PR guy. And Barbara Sharon actually is a music PR lady who has dealt with artists like Madonna, Bruce Springsteen. Like she was working at top level music, record labels and stuff, and promoting and being PR for these people. So, and she's a massive Chelsea fan as well. So it's two people that are good at PR. They are Chelsea fans. They have a pony in the race. And, you know, when I say all that, you know, automatically you're going, right, this Todd Bowley guy sounds like fucking...
This, I mentioned it to you last night on the show. This to me is like a typical American election, and these American boys are fighting out for a prize. Jill, you've mentioned people there. You can see the circles that they move in. So I tell you how much of a Jill Chelsea is. You know, Todd Bowley rocking up the Stamford Bridge. You're expecting him to wear the blue hat with "Make Chelsea Great Again" and all. You know what I mean?
No, that'd be the Ricketts.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. This is what you're looking at here. These guys, these are heavyweights over there, and they're fighting out for this prize, which is basically like fighting out for the presidential election or something like that.
Oh no, it's 100% like that.
And that's exactly the way this is going. And like the amount of photoshopping, I'd say, that's being done at the moment with these when they were all 7-year-olds with Coors jerseys on them and stuff like that and all, or whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like every one of these guys and girls, so they were all Chelsea fans. They were all at the bridge in '72 when this happened or that happened.
I was there in the '80s when we had the sign saying "Save the bridge." Yeah. You know what I mean?
The one that came out is obviously a man Voice, who came out and said, "I know nothing about football. I'm in Switzerland. I'm involved in banking or whatever it is. I don't know shit about football. I've never been involved in sports, but hell, I know about business and I know about making money." And that kind of didn't lend itself to the Chelsea fan base. They're going, "Is this lad coming in here with a few bob and stuff like that? He doesn't really give a shit about football."
I'm glad you mentioned that. He also mentioned his dislike for Roman Abramovich early in this process, which really rubbed Chelsea fans up the wrong way.
Well, it didn't help you because you were hurting. That wound was still open.
And he's the one component now of the Bowley bid that I'm a bit unsure of now. You know, because I don't care. I'll be honest with you. Listen, I'll lay it on the line. Listen, Trump doesn't bother me. I'm entertained by Trump. I think he's
yeah, but your man Voice is just putting the money in. You can see if Chelsea win another Champions League, he's going to be the guy sitting back at the desk with the cigar, getting the call from Bowley, going, "You know, we won the European Cup," and he go, "Yeah, that's great." You know, another 100 million in his coffers.
I'm 86. I'm 86. I'm enjoying it.
Just give a shit. Like you know what I mean? He's there going, "I'm going to invest a few bob in the thing, and I'm going to leave a bit of a legacy for my family or something like that they can inherit." You know what I mean? Maybe he has a son there, and the son was, you know, the son's big into Chelsea or something like that, and he's trying to edge it in there that maybe one day it will be him or something like that. He didn't endear himself greatly at all to anyone, really. You know, first of all, he's never done anything in sports or anything like that. You know what I mean? So then you're thinking you're only interested in the bottom line and the business, and that wouldn't endear itself to any football fan, really. You know, because we don't so much care about the profitability of the club as we do about the success and the players.
And that's kind of where I'm at. So you've got like one component where you're going, right, we're gonna fire rocks at the Ricketts. And we're going to go, all in on Bowley. But then you've got this, as you say, lad sitting there with the big floppy tits and big belly sitting there in the dressing gown, getting his feet warmed after a good skiing trip going,
yeah,
ow. I got no interest in going to London, baby.
Yeah, the cigar the size of a baseball bat or something, you know what I mean? And like you have the Bowley group going up today, and again, like I'm not firing bricks at anyone, you know what I mean?
No, you're actually
you're looking at the Bowley group,
is.
so you can imagine Todd rocking up today with Voice and Jonathan and Barbara and Daniel and all these people, and they're walking in blue suits like the Reservoir Dogs or something like that, you know what I mean? Go, hey guys, we've arrived, here's our plan. Oh, you want this and you want that and the other? Yeah, we'll add it to the list. And I meet with Paul Canavan, and he said, well, we'd love you to do this, this, and this. Consider it done, change the list. It's all done, you know what I mean? This is a fight. Who has the biggest balls in America, and who's
the thing is,
Voice
could be very, very replaceable anyway. And this is going to sound stupid coming from, me or you, but I think he's only worth the 4 billion. Do you know what I mean? And I say that in brackets. There are people still, like, in this negotiation process, there are still other people allowed to join other groups. So, yeah. I mean, he's not the main component behind it. So he's not the major backer. So
this is why I'm saying this is like an election.
Oh,
it's like an election. If you don't fancy your bids going right, well, there's room for you over here on the other side if you fancy it. It's not Blues versus Reds anymore. It's Blues versus Blues.
It's just, Vince McMahon and Ric Flair coming out, and then Rick saying the consortium was me, and all of a sudden Todd Bowley and the Ricketts are in it together.
I can't imagine what it's like going into one of those meetings with a multi-billionaire to sit across the table from. Like, imagine Paul Canavan today, or John Terry, or whoever's meeting with them, or Marina, or whatever it is, and they're sitting there and they're going, only 2 billion. You know what I mean? And just imagine the level that you're dealing with there. And like, these are people that breathe the same air as us, and they eat the same kind of food, and 9 times out of 10 they're living not a similar life, but you know what I mean, they're living life as we do, as the planet as it turns and everything and all. And you're there going, you're just walking in going, yeah, and we'll just throw another 500 million at that stadium development to get it over the line, and blah 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 blah. Like, it's like, for us, it's like, what do you mean I'm on 10.50 an hour? You know what I mean? It's, I just can't imagine what it's like walking into a meeting like that with that kind of power around the table, you know what I mean? And as you said, Todd Bowley rocking up to the match yesterday and the jeans on him and the scarf and all that, he was hardly going to rock up in a throne like Triple H at WrestleMania or something with a load of baseball lads carrying him in, going, the king has arrived, bow down to the king.
I think he would have been handed the club right there then if he did.
Yeah, imagine like an opening ceremony for the AFCON or something like that. He's coming in on the throne, and he's just flicking 100 quid notes out to people and stuff like that. And all, and a picture of Roman on the notes and all. We'll never forget the effort you made and all this. And they're all praising them and all that. It's crazy.
I love it. Yeah. Well, look, that's the Todd Bowley group. Now we'll kind of fly through the last two, and then we'll talk a little bit about stadium.
Yep.
Steve Pagliuca, this is such a strange one. I don't know how he's even made it to the final four. Apparently he's not even, a lot of the backers, he's not even sure of whether they're actually backers. So I don't know what this is. Steve Pagliuca, when I heard Boston Celtics, I got very excited. Being an Irishman, not that I'm a Boston Celtics fan, but it's one of those franchises that you just appreciate. You know what I mean? Kind of like the Chicago Bulls.
History.
Same as the Cubs and the Dodgers. You know what I mean? They're franchises that you absolutely idolize and grew up with. Obviously, us being wrestling fans, we're very into our Americana. I think that's probably
yes, absolutely.
But Steve, he was in talks with Steve Pagliuca was in he's been talking to a load of co-investors ahead of the deadline next Monday. Bob Iger, the most prominent names in American entertainment history. I think everyone knows who Bob Iger is. The private equity billionaire who owns the Boston Celtic basketball team was approached by a number of wealthy businessmen, including the former Walt Disney chief, who was Bob Iger, about backing. But Bob Iger, still, it's not confirmed whether he is or he isn't. And when you look at his value, he's in the millions, not the billions.
Yeah, there's nothing ever sure about Walt Disney, is there? Walt Disney's always that grey area. Me and you being a bit tinfoil at times.
We won't say
but we won't say too much. But I'm sure when you read Walt Disney on that, you'll go, nah.
It's like the kid in you goes, do you know what? Disney's cool. You know what I mean? There's, Jiminy Cricket and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I visions of you going to Hollywood studios and they have the Didier Drogba ride and all this kind of thing. And that's, my mind just goes crazy. We go from a presidential election nearly to a Walt Disney World.
Yeah.
Chelsea's Walt Disney World in the middle of London. And you have the Didier Drogba ride and the Peter Cech shootout ride through the ghost train and all this kind of thing. And it's just,
that's it. It was like, even when we heard that, they were trying to buy over WWE, we were a bit apprehensive going, don't know about that. Do we want an Undertaker ride or the Ric Flair chop shop? You know what I mean? Where you can go in and get your hair cut.
Wrestling way more suited to it, of course, than football.
Oh, 100%. But even at that, basically here, this is the important part, right? The Chelsea Supporters Trust, which I'm a member of myself. So, believe it or not, I get a say too. I get the statements, and I have to say a shout out to the Chelsea Supporters Trust. Obviously, most people listen to this that are Chelsea fans have probably signed up by now, or they're getting regular updates about it. They issued a statement basically saying it had yet to be contacted by Pagliuca with just a week to go before the deadline. So this guy hasn't even arranged a meeting.
Yeah, this is the guy running for president who doesn't have a presidential campaign. That's what I'm talking about. These are guys that have loaded bank accounts.
You have to have independence.
These are guys who are just grabbing their balls and they all want to throw them up on the desk to show their Billy Big Balls in the terms of this financial wealth circle. Any guy who hasn't been mentioned in this yet is very upset about it at this stage, that they haven't been either contacted or involved or at the forefront.
Poor little Nick Candy, he thought he was on home and away, coming outside the stadium, and he's a lifelong Chelsea fan. He's obviously got the trophy wife in Holly Valance, and it's like obviously someone didn't want him anywhere near that club. And to be honest with you, I'm one of them. Don't tell me you were there with your dad and all while you're going into bang Holly Valance, and most people would probably be not opposed to that, but you know what I mean, it reeked of bullshit, you know what I mean? So obviously Pagliuca came out of nowhere, so obviously he has something here, and you can't just write him off yet, because obviously if his bid was accepted, there's obviously people in the background here, and this is the very, very, we're making jokes and all about it, but we don't know. There could be some crazy motherfucker with money somewhere in the world. The only thing with the Pagliuca thing is that he does have a major shareholder with Atalanta, as you know, and that would be a problem. Now, I heard something today that Matt Law said that apparently they don't kick in till late April. So.
Yeah, I can see someone's on the phone to Atalanta dumping that stock exchange stuff really, really quick or whatever it is.
Boy.
Do I want to be at Atalanta or do I want to own this gem in London?
Exactly. So I mean, I would say watch this space in the interest of fairness and giving everyone a fair shout here with the four. If they are the final four, they have some sort of backing somehow. Now, this is the strangest one, and Niall, you're going to know a little bit about this in terms of who the guy we're talking about here is. Former Liverpool chairman, Sir Martin Broughton.
Broughton.
I say Broughton like Broughton, because Irish. His bid is partly financed by the Crystal Palace shareholders, Josh Harris and Dave Blitzer, which is just madness. And last week, Sky News revealed that the fan-led group, co-founded by the former Chelsea captain Terry, was in positive talks with two of the shortlisted bidders about acquiring 10%. Now, that doesn't mean Terry was in talks with Broughton. It just means he was in with two. Now, my prediction, the two that he's in with are the two front runners. The Broughton one is a strange one, isn't it? Because I mean, you cannot have two ponies in the race in the Premier League for a start. And I heard again, Matt Law, I'm going to credit him on this one. Is it a case that it's like we found a better boat, and we're happy for the other one to sink a little bit? Very strange. And can you, for any Chelsea fans that aren't familiar with him, can you shed any light on him, as because a lot of Chelsea fans found a lot of dirt on this guy as well. So it's like,
well, as I said you already, if you dig deep enough on these guys, you're going to find dirt on
anybody.
Everyone, you know what I mean?
Don't become a billionaire from just being good at something.
Yeah, don't pull open someone else's wardrobe till you open your own first.
Unless you're Elon Musk, sorry.
Yeah, I thought the Crystal Palace one was an interesting one. Maybe it's a case they want a ground share with you with Selhurst Park while you redevelop Stamford Bridge or something like that. Yeah, but you can't have that co-ownership thing there. We had trouble with that in the past, I think, with a Newcastle bid, didn't they? And they were related to Man City or something like that, and it got shut down or something like that. So yeah, I would imagine if the opportunity is to move, to Stamford Bridge and sell off what they have at Crystal Palace, I don't think it will be a problem for Crystal Palace, because I think there will be suitors there to invest there as well.
Oh, yeah.
They're a fairly developed club.
Any Premier League club is going to get suitors. Yeah.
Absolutely. The John Terry thing, I think, is very interesting. It's a nice little move for him as well, in terms of, and it shows his commitment to the club as well after being gone for a little bit. But it shows that his love is still there and stuff like that for the club, which is great to see, you know what I mean? And it's it's an interesting one. I suppose from the Ryan Banks point of view, they have to be seen to, I know they've been flexible in the times and stuff like that and the dates, but they've also been a little bit flexible in the process, I was reading today.
Yeah, and I think the commission rises, but they also.
Yeah, and I think for the Ryan Bank as well, I think, look, if the commission is $500 million or if it's 600 million, like 100 million to them.
I think in fairness to them, I think it's a modest fee.
Well, whatever the fee is, if the difference,
you'll enjoy this. It's a modest fee of like about 30 to 40 million.
Yeah, I think it's way more than that. I think that's just what's being contrived. I don't think
it's something like the Ryan Bank pocket.
I don't think the Ryan Bank could be putting themselves through this process for the sake of 30 million when we're talking in the billions somehow. But they certainly get enough to cover the Christmas party for sure. I think they probably have to have 3 or 4 in there. But the reality is, I think when you look from the outside in, it's been the top 2 that you spoke about really are the leading contenders.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't expect the bottom 2 to come off the third bend and win it on the line by somehow, Yeah. The fact that your man Paluca hasn't really approached anyone or stuff like that, I get with a lot of these guys, it might be just an advertising campaign to be mentioned in these circles. Because as I said to you, there's a lot of guys throwing the balls up onto a desk to just get a mention. And I think that's what it might be. I think if it was more than that, I think they would be more active. As I said to you, this is not really going to come down to money, because all these guys like crap money out of the back of 40-foot containers, basically, you know what I mean? So they can bring in whoever they want, and they can bring in more financial backing and whatever it will take to get this over the line. So the reality is it's not going to come down to money. The reality is it's going to come down to a selling job and a commitment that each of these bidders are going to make. They're all in around the circle of wealth. They all have plenty of money. Which you mentioned
at the start, before the show, are prerequisites of what Roman and the board have put forward. Like it's not just a case; it's a contract, and I'm sure there's fine details within that contract that say if you don't read it, and we're going to get into
the things they put in that pre-contract thing that they want to do will be the things that you would expect high-end investors to want to do anyway if they're sincere about what they're doing.
Yes.
I mean, they're not buying Chelsea Football Club to just attain the bridge and develop it into a load of apartment blocks. This is not their stick. These are sports guys, LA Dodgers, all this kind of thing, Cubs.
Franchises.
Celtics. These are franchises. These are big sports guys, and they see Chelsea as being there into the European market in terms of football and how it's grown and stuff like that, and its development over there in the MLS and in soccer as in the States, as they call it. So it's a big thing for them, and they've seen how the likes of FSG and the Glazers and the Cronkies have flourished and made good money, not necessarily by running clubs the way you would want these guys to come in and run Chelsea, but running them in a way that allows them to make easy money, I would call it, really. It's effortless for them, really.
Well, that's kind of why I wanted to, the one bid in particular, I think the closest that you get to Abramovich, I think, is the Ricketts, because of the pure financial clout behind it. Would be a case where, we can do the stadium, we can do this, we can do that. The Todd Bowley one still obviously has a lot of financial clout. You're going to be looking probably, if you put them all together, like they can buy whoever they want. They can do whatever they want.
I don't think there's anything that's required that either of them couldn't do. And just be honest with you, I don't think there's anything that's required that any of the four couldn't do.
Oh no, 100%.
You know what I
But
mean?
the thing about it, the reason I wanted to ask you about the FSG model is because a lot of people said that's Todd Bowley seems to be very, very shrewd in running his sports teams in that sense. He obviously backs himself with property developers and stuff. And one of the things that obviously you've done with Anfield is that you're redoing the stadium as you go. Yeah. And I was very interested to hear today that is about what the Rain Group and Bowley's group have said. We're not going to do this moving to Wembley for 4 years, knocking down the whole stadium. And then we're going to do it stand by stand where we'll still have the fans involved, which, for me, being at the Bridge myself, it's a very, very special stadium in a sense of like, you go there and you remember like Solar free kicks in 99 against Barcelona, or the two goals.
French in history, even way back before that.
You can go back to Osgood, you can go back to, you know what I mean? You can go back to anybody, you can go back to Drake, you can go back to everybody. And I think it's one of it, like you ask Arsenal or you ask Tottenham fans or you ask West Ham fans, guarantee they'll say that they love their old stadiums. You ask the real fans. I mean,
I think from Tottenham's point of view, I wouldn't think they're too upset because it's a fantastic stadium that they have. I remember the old White Hart Lane as well, but I think the stadium they've moved to is built for success and future success and signing players and getting the right people in. And I think in time it will happen. I think in time it will happen. I think it will because the stadium is absolutely. I don't know if you say it, but it looks fantastic.
The stadium's fantastic. But
with Arsenal, I'd say Arsenal will tell you that, like, they tore down Highbury for this, and most fans would say it was probably a mistake. They loved Highbury, and it had its history as well.
Same with Upton Park, most
definitely as well.
Definitely.
But I mean, the reality is, I suppose the big thing in this that's been come true for me, what I've read it with the Chelsea fan base is, it's Stamford Bridge or bust. There's not really a decision to be made there, and that's why you mentioned the FSG model. And I think with FSG as well, the interesting thing that you're going to come out of this is you're coming out with people who are going to be financially answerable for their moves. It's not necessarily, well, Roman spent 100 million on Lukaku, didn't kind of work, so we'll bin that and we'll do something else. People are going to have to be answerable for these moves now. And that's why I always say with people when they're hating on FSG and our own fan base and stuff like that, you got to understand these are businessmen. They're in the process of making money. They're not there to make losses, but they're also there to secure the future of the club and so not go
they crazy. Can make money.
Yeah, but also that it's over a longer period of time, that they bring success for a longer period of time, that like you're going to settle yourself, that you're always going to be in the top four or challenging for titles. 100%. You're always going to be in the European scene. So there's always that financial clout coming through. And in the same breath, developing new training facilities, developing the stadium all the time to its absolute maximum as much as you can. And I think they'll take the same approach at Chelsea. I think that any talk at all from any of these bidders about Stamford Bridge being knocked to the ground or Stamford Bridge being, you guys moving somewhere else while this whole new stadium happens and all. And the thing about it is, and I was listening to Rory Jennings, who has a good channel out there, Rory's a good Chelsea fan as well, and he mentioned as well, where do you move? Because if you go 6 miles in any direction from Stamford Bridge, you're basically intruding on another football club in London. That was a very valid point that he made. If you go one way, you're at West Ham. If you go another way, you're at Tottenham or Arsenal, whatever it is. You go another way, you're at Crystal Palace. So no matter what way Chelsea would move from Stamford Bridge, you're kind of moving out of Chelsea.
Of course you are, because you're in that little bubble. You're on the Fulham Broadway, you're on the Fulham Road, you know what I mean? And you're like, I mean, I know initially back in 2018, they had talked about the site at Battersea Power Station, if you remember. And they were talking about redeveloping that, and there was plans for that, and there was uproar, and obviously the Chelsea trust owners, the pitch owners said no. Abramovich ended up caving and saying, right, the only option here to make this possibly is 62 to 64, possibly 1,000 seater, which I think is more than enough. it's more than enough because it's going to bring in more revenue. Because when you do it, then you got to remember where a lot of Arsenal's revenue comes from. Exactly when you look at the Emirates, it's not just the size of the stadium; it's the amount of corporate boxes and stuff that they have. Yeah. It's all of those little details that really make it really important. And I think for you guys, it's obviously similar. You have a very old stadium like Chelsea do, where you've kind of added in bits and pieces to kind of get more executive boxes in, and that's why they're doing it stand by stand. But the point I wanted to make on that is that there was obviously a blueprint that was approved by the council. Obviously, people still had the right to sun. That's why they couldn't build the stadium any higher, because obviously you would be blocking out the natural light for apartments and stuff like that. And having been there, seeing it, I understand what that means. Obviously, we have to dig underground, build then over the railway system that's behind. So, I mean, these plans have already been approved, and it's been shown that it can be done.
Yeah.
And you're going to redevelop that area into something that's going to look like a fucking Disneyland in itself for a Chelsea fan, really.
Yeah.
It is to me already, regardless. Yeah, you know what I mean? You know, but it's interesting times, isn't it? And I do like that kind of model that they're kind of following with the FSG thing. And I like Todd Bowley's one in particular, that they'll spend money on the squad, but they want the sports data that supports the manager and the team. And I really like that. You know, I really do, because it's like, if you're going to drop 150 million, you're not dropping 100 of that on, you know, Romelu Lukaku, who doesn't fit your system. No, you're going, right, who's this guy? Let's bring Armando Broja back. Let's bring Conor Gallagher back. Let's bring Levi Colwill back from Huddersfield.
Yeah.
They're 3 new signings, basically. And then let's look at the pieces that we can get rid of here and restructure the wage bill. We can restructure the team so that, you know, because obviously if there are 3 players that are already being talked about that Tuchel has said basically he wants in the squad next season, they're players that he's looking at going, right, well, I have this. So I don't need you to spend an astronomical amount of money. And Niall, I'll pass this over to you now in a second. This is why I wanted to, and look, I get the banter, but for the fans thinking this is the end of the Chelsea model as we know it, I think that's absolutely incorrect. You're not going to spend 3 billion. This is the biggest sale of a sports club in the history of sports. That's a fact. Like, go through. I was only looking this up today. There has been no bigger sale of a sports club. This is
certainly in football circles.
That's what I mean. Yeah,
well, see, the problem with that is because they generally don't come up for sale.
No. And especially a club like Chelsea, who are the current European and world champions, like it's
and that's why to pun a baseball term, because these guys are involved. These guys are knocking it out of the park to try and land this. You know what I mean? Because that's the reason for it. But I just think it's as I said to you, it's going to be really exciting for you guys. I think it might take a bit of time for Tuchel to get in place what he wants, and there'll be a bit of settling down and a bit of him trying to adjust to the understanding of FSG. We had it with Klopp as well. It took a bit of time to get there, and you go through a couple of years where you're kind of going, do any of these guys actually kind of know what they're doing? You know, I remember back that West Brom game, and I was going, is this actually right? Is this the way we want? And it's only now looking back, I can see where it came from and where we were going and stuff like that. But as long as you have a plan in place, and as long as you can see where it's going and you're patient, you can understand that it's going to take that bit of time. These guys are not going to come in, and Thomas Tuchel's not going to rock up to the office and go, right, Mbappe and Haaland. Yeah, you know, it's just not going to work.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that, and Man United fans out there would kill for this kind of vision. You know what I mean? The vision that an FSG has, or you know, the potential buyers of Chelsea has. One thing I wanted to mention, obviously Thomas Tuchel said the other day, someone asked him, obviously in the press conference after Real Madrid, it's the first time we've seen Thomas Tuchel properly pissed off actually at his team, and rightly so, I believe.
And a proper go.
Rightly so.
And that's what you want from your manager.
Absolutely. One thing he said was that he was asked the question, what do you want from a new owner? And he mentioned 2 things that you just said: stability, backing me on the pitch,
a plan.
Yeah.
Simple. And would you expect any different from a top level German manager?
No.
You know what I mean? And the thing about it is, it's really important for Chelsea to understand, you know, there's really only a handful of world-class managers in the world in terms of football. and you guys have one, and we have one, and City have one. And you can see the difficulty that United have had in trying to acquire one and get it right and get it wrong and stuff like that. So it's really, really important that, as you said when we spoke on the other podcast, the focal point of this has been nailing Tuchel down and making sure you support him and give him what he needs, but in a structured kind of fashion where it makes sense, and that you understand not only your plan in terms of a business and the development of Chelsea, but you understand his plan. And he's a football guy and he wants success. He wants to win everything. And I just think it's really important from that point of view that they come together and they understand, because obviously as American owners, we've seen with our own, culturally they need to be educated at times in terms of football.
Yeah.
That it's not quite the same that if you want to move a baseball stadium 50 miles down the road in America, it doesn't seem to be a big deal. But when you want to move Anfield or you want to move Stamford Bridge, that becomes a very big deal. That's a breaking point. And our owners have made mistakes like that in the past. And your owners will make mistakes like that as well. There's no doubt about it. It will take time for them to understand the culture of that's inbred there in Chelsea Football Club. And the difference between operating between a Roman Abramovich and between a US owner who, as I said in podcasts in the past, FSG are accountable for what they spend. And they can go bust just like any other company if they make the wrong decisions. And I think it's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to Monday to see who's coming out of this bid and what's happening and how this election develops, as they say.
Now, I would say, don't be surprised if it's the 13th or the 14th. I'm just saying that.
The 11th, we'll get an idea.
From what I'm hearing, though,
stuff breaks out.
Yeah, but the one thing I will say, just to close on that, 100%. I think one of the things that kind of obviously is kind of separating Chelsea from other clubs that have been bought over, including FSG, is that they've obviously looked at that and the fact that they do want involvement of the likes of John Terry and that kind of golden share means that there's going to be people there that can refute and say, no, we're here to actually ingrain our culture on you so that that every time you go, all right, why don't we do this over here? Why don't we build a statue of Mickey Mouse at the back of Stamford Bridge for the crack? I'm just, that's a knock on Muhammad Al Fayed when he put Michael Jackson outside Craven Cottage. Just don't ask me why, it just came into my head. But like those sort of decisions will be fucking questioned. You know what I mean? And I think this is why the bid is taking so long also, because there are so many moving parts and there's so many layers. Like this onion is just getting peeled and peeled and peeled, and we're no nearer to the core of where it's going. But I think we're getting closer, but we're not quite there yet. And I think that's really what it is. It's about, and then
you're going to get your answers in April. And the thing about it is, it has to happen as well to bring that bit of stability back to the club and stuff like that. Because
well, that's it. Because
as I said to you the other night, you've been dealing with so much crap on and off the pitch with all the stuff that we mentioned the other night, that it's about time things kind of settle down a little bit. And Chelsea Football Club, as a football club, got back to the business of football. Which has been very difficult for them to do. And I understand. I was in the midst of it with Liverpool when they went through that stuff with Gillette and Hicks.
Yeah.
Should I even mention?
Exactly.
But yeah, as I said, for you guys, it's exciting. For me, it's like I'm looking down a telescope here going, where's this going to go? And then the problem is, will the current American owners that are in there at the moment, they're going to have to step up if this is going to be the benchmark in terms of competing. And then what are the Saudi boys in Newcastle and in Man City going to do? The Premier League is going to be, for the next 10 years, the landscape of the Premier League is going to be unbelievable. I see a situation where we're going to have 6 to 8 teams potentially in title races in the future, and it's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
And really exciting for fans, and it's, you know what I mean? The Newcastles of this world are going to rise up again and they're going to be unbelievable. Man City will continue what it does, and then it's a question of what's going to happen then when these managers move on. What happens if Klopp decides to move on or Pep decides to move on? What's the plan? What are the managers that are out there? How are you going to convince guys to come in? And it's really exciting times for football fans.
It can be like the next one is like how do Man City make it to the top richest club in the world from revenue when they literally get 20 people in their stadium? What magical company are the Saudis or the, whatever Abu Dhabi company going to come up with next? And
accountants are brilliant people, aren't they?
man, it's fantastic. I mean, when you just look at that and you go, Man City are ahead of Liverpool, Chelsea, and everyone here on revenue, you're going, okay, fair enough.
Like,
is there even a supporters club in the United States or Japan?
Someone's filing accounts somewhere and someone's signing off on them. So somewhere along that line, there's a truth within a riddle.
And UEFA seem to want to look this way as it happens. So yeah, that's my kind of a little bitter pill to swallow and just.
You won't have to worry about that going forward because.
By the way, quick question actually, just for football and talking about corruption before we go. Today, it coming out that they're talking about having two clubs just automatically be in the Champions League because of history. Absolute ridiculous, right? Even as a Liverpool fan, let's say you were one of the clubs, you'd be like, that's.
Yeah, well, look, I wouldn't be an advocate of the Champions League anyway. I'm an advocate of the old European Knockout Cup. That's the one that I loved. So, I at the end of the day, the champions should be in the Champions League, and I think everyone else that's runners up, I don't know what. Look, it's all just based on revenue, marketing, and TV rights. I don't think it's a good idea. I think the winners should get in, and I think everyone else should have to. Look, if it's how can you do it based on history? If you do it based on history, well, then we're guaranteed it for the next 50 years. Who's catching up on us that quick? You know what I mean? And it's.
But then again, you could look at it and you can go, right, well then if you look at trophies won, I mean, it's a juggle between, say,
but they're probably talking about your history in that tournament because they wouldn't care about that.
It means Real Madrid are in there and then you're literally flipping a coin with Liverpool. And
the chances are, if you're talking about, if you're looking at it, probably 20 of those teams that fall out of the hat probably qualify each year anyway. So it wouldn't really matter,
Well, look, when we get our third Champions League trophy this year, when we come back, like we did against Napoli back in the day in 2012, when we won the cup, when everyone had written us off, when we come back and beat them at their own Bernabeu.
Have to do what we did to Barcelona, but away from home.
I'm telling you, there you go. Never, ever quit. So
need Kovacic to walk out on the pitch with those big balls in his shorts. Give Kroos and Modric what they deserve. Pumped up, big traps, the whole lot. Say to Jorginho, you sit on the bench there, boy. You're not up for this. This is a proper row.
Listen, you keep those skinny arms on the bench, son. Yeah. Take a day off. I've got this.
Can't they? You go forward and create stuff. I'll look after midfield here. I have these two boys all on my own.
I've got this sorted. Yeah, no. So it's look, listen, keep the faith, Chelsea faithful, because in my opinion, this toy is not over yet. Especially after what I heard from Tuchel yesterday. This could go two ways, but you could really see now him going, right, I don't have to answer to Roman anymore. You, son, forget about it.
It's an interesting spin of the roulette wheel. That can either motivate guys, or you could have an absolute disaster at the Bernabeu where they turn around and go, well, this guy doesn't fancy us anyway and he thinks we're crap.
Well, good luck to them then with new owners coming in.
Absolutely.
Very quick, right? You can go and play with Palestine with Mr. Broughton. Off you go, son.
When we do the tape trading.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what I mean?
No, it's interesting. I don't know. I don't know what to think about that one. It's going to be an intriguing toy anyway. It's going to be one of the toys to watch. Look, Bayern Munich got beaten by Villarreal as well. Football's gone mad.
New goalkeeper at the end of the season, according to Twitter as well.
For you guys?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, new goalkeeper according to Twitter. I made a point of just saying, and I want to say this to Chelsea fans, I made a point on my Twitter saying, I think Mendy has looked shaky like this for the last, and I've noticed him on a little bit of a downward slope over the last few weeks. And I also mentioned Kante in it as well. Under no circumstances did I advocate for them getting out of the club. It's like, Jesus Christ, some fan bases are absolutely mental. But no,
Chelsea has a little bit of a wobble in its spine at the moment. That's all. Just needs to straighten its back out. It's hurt its back weightlifting or something. It just needs to straighten it out and give it a bit of time.
Well, I think Edward Mendy just now needs to realise, just kick that fucking ball like he wants to kick the fans that want to kick him out of the team. You know what I mean? Look at that ball as that and just, poof it out every time you're in.
If you fancy yourself playing outfield, just give the gloves to Kepa then, will you?
Please. You know what I mean?
But you won't be playing outfield because your footwork is horrendous.
Yeah, Kepa probably could play outfield, to be fair. Put him in centre back. He's decent on the ball.
Yeah.
But look, no, it's been a great show. Pleasure to have you on. Thanks a lot for coming on today. Because obviously, we covered a lot of ground today, and it's nice to have a different fan perspective, especially who is owned by American owners and knows the kind of process that we go through. So it was, hell of a show. So, Niall, obviously, people can find you on Twitter, on YouTube, and everything in between. So why don't you tell people where they can find you, even though they might be Chelsea fans? You're not a biased football fan on your Monday mashup. So
no, our Chelsea fans, you to be on the Monday mashup, and all Chelsea fans are always welcome on the show. It's the Upper Tier podcast on YouTube, and it's obviously the Upper Tier as well on the audios on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music. Twitter, it's at the _upper_tier, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, the Upper Tier, and on TikTok, actually, the Upper Tier podcast. So we're basically on all the socials. You find us. If you want to email us, uppertierpodcast@gmail.com, you can get us there as well. And if any of your Chelsea viewers or subscribers want to come on at any time to have a chat on the show or do anything, give us a shout. Not a problem. Always welcome.
There you go. There's a call out by Niall himself. So please do come on. And don't forget, guys and gals, we are trying to grow this channel. So make sure that you do like, subscribe, comment, and share, and hit the bell notification, most importantly, so you get our shows. And let's start a journey together, because I'm doing this for entertainment value and for the love of the club. So if you're sitting back there and you're going, oh, I disagree with him, or yeah, I agree with him, remember, I'm doing it for this, just like you. It's not like I'm getting paid for this. I love this football club, and I love each and every one of you because you love that football club. So next time we're at the bridge, we'll share a beer together, and who knows, we might even do a little video together. So please do support us on our journey. And until the next time, for me, Ian Kelly, your host, for Niall Hogan, the Upper Tier host, we are over and out.